Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second day of this Info Day. We are already more than 400 participants attending the meeting, so let's see if we can get to the nearly or more than 650 participants that we had yesterday when Barbara was sharing the meeting. I'm Jordi Torrent. I'm head of Department of Evaluation and Innovation. I'm going to be chairing this session this morning. So we have a session on scientific developments. I guess that will be regulatory scientific developments mostly. And we have some very interesting presentations provided by colleagues from the agency and from the industry, all of them with a very strong experience into the area. So we are going to start with the first session that will be on a regulatory update from Emily Drury. Emily has been working on regulatory affairs for more than 20 years. So she started in 2001 her career at Cyton Bioscience, and in 2009 and 10, more than 10 years ago, she joined the agency, and she's currently the team leader of the recently formed Veterinary Regulatory Affairs team. So she has a very long presentation. We've discussed that about if we wanted to divide it in two, but we thought it would be better to just give all her detailed information in one go. So Emily, please go ahead.
Thank you, and good morning again. So as Jordi said, I'm going to be giving a rather long presentation on a regulatory update on various topics. And I will start with a disclaimer that many of the topics in this presentation are still under discussion or construction in some way. And so the views expressed at this point in time are in no way binding to the final future conclusions on some of them. We know that some of the points might raise some principal questions, but we thought it was important to give you the most current information on the state of the art, as it were, and also it's equally important to communicate the areas where there are still some kind of uncertainty. So I will give you a brief run through, of the topics that I will cover, if I can get my presentation to work. So yeah, so this is the overview of the contents. There's a mix of them, and if anybody can find the common theme between them, I'm sure we can find a prize somewhere for you, because I certainly couldn't. Anyway, I will start with duplicate marketing authorizations in the centralized procedure, then move to grouping of certain types of variations requiring assessment, then the new Qld template and its associated variation, a little bit on classification or prescription status, even smaller amount on prophylaxis indications for existing authorized antimicrobials, and then some of the articles on data protection, not all of them. I'll then move to indefinite validity of centralized marketing authorizations. So that is with the removal of renewals. So that's linked to that topic. And then we've added on a last topic, which is really not connected to any of the above, which is the union interest referrals. But it was a good opportunity to provide some information on that. So I think you can see with this mix of topics, I feel a little bit like a bad DJ when I'm doing this presentation, because there will not be a smooth transition from one slide to the next. So apologies for that, and bear with me. I'll dive straight in with the duplicate marketing authorizations in the centralized procedure only I'm talking about today. And some of you may have noticed that, in fact, there are no explicit provisions within the regulation on duplicates in the centralized procedure, although there are explicit mentions of it in the mutual recognition and decentralized procedure. But we were reassured from discussions that there was no intention to exclude them, so they can carry on. And we're still interested in them. So for our administrative purposes, we will continue to request that you inform us of whether a marketing authorization application is a duplicate or not. And that comes down to the terms of same applicant and same product. And we continue to use the previously established definitions for those points, because the legal principles behind them have not changed. And they can be, for example, the definition of same applicant can be fairly broad. Then a question that we have quite often is what is the basis for eligibility for a duplicate? And I take the opportunity because the concept of duplicates causes an enormous amount of confusion still to experienced colleagues. And just to clarify that a duplicate is not the legal basis of the marketing authorization application. It is, if you like, an additional state of being of the application. The legal basis for the marketing authorization application remains according to the usual articles. So it's if the duplicate is submitted as a full new marketing authorization, it will be submitted under Article 8 and you would request eligibility accordingly. If it's an auto-generic, the eligibility, the legal basis for the application would be Article 18, and you would request eligibility as a generic. And for a self-informed consent marketing authorization, the application is submitted under Article 21, and eligibility can be requested according to an informed consent. But the bottom line is that duplicates are always eligible in the centralized procedure, and you might hear us referring to this as automatic access. I'm sorry for the dreadful regulatory slang of auto-generic and self-informed consent, but I think we all end up using it. So the good news, and here we can flag up reduction in regulatory burden, is that it is no longer a requirement in the centralized procedure to obtain a prior consent from the European Commission before submitting the marketing authorization application for the duplicate. You will remember that in the past this had to be done before submission and the consent had to be included in the dossier. This is no longer a requirement, so that is good news. There is one point to flag, and it's probably one of those things which wasn't necessarily an intention, but nevertheless it exists, and it's in view of one of the pharmacovigilance articles, Article 77, paragraph 2, where there is a requirement to have the same pharmacovigilance master file in place for products that fall within the definition of same medicinal product, which of course covers duplicates. So as I say, this may not have been written with duplicates in mind, but it was just a flag that this requirement does exist. Right, it's time for the first dreadful transition, I'm afraid, to grouping of variations. So we still have grouping under this regulation, so it's not a new concept. But we have some principles that we're all learning with, and especially as far as the old line extensions are concerned. So these are now classified. We have an EMA CMDV classification document for variations requiring assessment. And these are what we call the I-scope variations, the X-line extensions. We have published post-authorization question and answers. And in one of those questions, you'll see that we discourage the grouping of I-scope variations with non-I-scope variations. And we'd like to explain the rationale for that a little bit, because as you will recall, for the X-line extensions, we had a 210-day timetable. We're now down to a 60 or 90-day timetable, so considerably shorter. And it's quite important that we don't overload these assessment procedures, and that we keep the assessment load proportionate to the available timetable. Because if we don't do that, we can end up compromising the outcome a little bit if there's too many open issues within a timetable that can't accommodate the load, if you like. So one example is, in the past, we may have been able to be more flexible with introducing, for example, changes to the ASMF within a line extension, but going forwards, we wouldn't see that as feasible to do so within an unrelated I-scope variation. And we would ask that such changes are submitted separately and not simultaneously. What's important here is that they're not trying to be assessed at the same time. It's not just a question of separating them out from the grouping. If you have a doubt, please do contact us on our very well used vet.applications email address. However, we do realize that in some cases, companies are going to need to simultaneously submit an I-scope variation with a non-I-scope variation. And this is and particularly where each of those changes are going to affect the product information, so the SPC, label or leaflet. It's in no one's interest to have two parallel procedures running that are affecting the product information at the same time, because then we're just running things in parallel, and that can lead to errors. So, and an increase in administrative burden. So in those cases, please do discuss the possibility of grouping with us. Okay, next topic is the QRD template. It's a fond favorite of mine. So we have a new QRD template, and we have an associated variation. And for those of you who perhaps weren't connected yesterday, the Commission highlighted that there will be a transitional regulation, sorry, that's probably not the right word to use, a regulation with transitional rules for packaging and labeling that is expected, I think, and as Ava said yesterday, it's moving at lightning speed, and it's, I think, if I've got it right, should be in place by in June at least. And so this is to provide the transitional, a 5-year transitional period for products that were authorized in accordance with either the previous directive, or for centralized products with the previous centralized regulation. And products whose product information was authorized in accordance with the respective provisions of that previous legislation can be placed on the market with that product information for until the 29th of January 2027. So again, that's all good news and quite a relief. But it does need to be done, and as Ava said yesterday, we definitely encourage that that everyone starts thinking about it in good time. And the regulatory mechanism to align the product information with the requirements of the regulation is to transfer the existing product information to the new QRD template and submit this for regulatory approval through a variation requiring assessment with the classification GI18. We've started to receive, we've certainly had I would say at least 30 or 40 notifications of intention to submit this variation to us. And we have seen obviously some questions coming in. And what we've done is to develop, it's a single page document with some practical advice to marketing authorization holders before submission of the variation. Just pointers on what to put in track changes, what to put in the present and proposed table in the application form. And this advice will be sent to all marketing authorization holders at the point that they notify us of their intention to submit the variation. And we are sending it retrospectively to the companies that already notified us. So if you already notified us, you should be receiving it. Some of you will have received it this week, and if not, next week, I would say. To clarify that, because this is a question we do get, it's not possible to transfer the product information to the new QRD template within another ongoing or planned variation requiring assessment. We do require a dedicated BRA GI18 for each product. There is a preference, and I'm sure for companies as well, to group this with a more, so it can be grouped with another variation, but that scope must be submitted. And there is a preference to group it with a more substantial safety and efficacy variation. And I hope this doesn't sound too pedantic if we say, but please try to avoid grouping with reference to my previous slide with one of the X-line extensions if the assessment burden is already going to be very high. Just check. Yeah. Okay, so a little bit more on the QRD template. I think Kat Sterling mentioned it yesterday, somebody mentioned it yesterday, that we have had queries on the fee that is associated with the BRA GI18, and in particular for pharmaceutical products, because as was the case previously and continues to be the case, there is a fee incentive already for immunological products. So the fees for immunologicals are lower and the fees for pharmaceuticals are higher. So we've heard you. We are exploring a fee incentive for the pharmaceuticals only. We've started the process, but it is going to take a few months to go through the administrative layers, and it has to go all the way to the top. And So just to say that that is ongoing. We can't provide any guarantee at the moment that it will be accepted, and it will not apply retrospectively. So we are, anyone who's informing us of their intention to submit at the moment, we are advising them of this and giving them the option to delay submission until we can give you an outcome on the fee. But I have to say, so far, companies have continued and informed us that they wish to continue to submit as planned. Then a few more high-level points with regard to this whole exercise. As David Murphy, the CVMP chair, mentioned yesterday, the CVMP is developing guidance on Article 34, so classification or prescription status, which is included within a section of the SPC. Because that CVMP guidance is ongoing, any review of classification for existing products would take place outside of the VRA GI18 when the respective CVMP guidance is finished, and that's to make sure that we're in a position to apply it in a consistent way. Other CVMP guidelines that can be considered, and that we have revised CVMP SPC guidelines on antimicrobials and antiparasitics. If marketing authorization holders request to align their product information with those guidelines at the time of the VRA GI 18, the EMA can certainly agree to it, but we would not make it mandatory at that time. However, I do take the opportunity to remind that there is an article in the regulation, Article 58, paragraph 3, which is a responsibility of the marketing authorization holder to ensure that the product information is kept up to date with current scientific knowledge. So I think that was in the previous directive as well. There is no need for a critical expert report in the VRA GI 18, unless you would wish to be critical of how you've aligned with the new Qld template. Hopefully not, but you could, of course, provide it if, for example, there has been alignment with the antiparasitic or antimicrobial SPC guidelines and there were any arguments that you wish to present. And we do have published in April, so quite new, a new Qld combined label leaflet template. So this is for the situation where there's no package leaflet and all the information must therefore appear on the outer packaging. So in my mind, this sort of works on giant sacks of product, but I'm sure it works in a lot of other situations. I should probably spend more time in labeling facilities. Okay, I'm getting even more granular now with the detail on the Qld template. These are really more practical tips. And the first one is there is a section in the SPC which essentially we would ask you to disregard at the current time because it's the underpinning systems are perhaps still in development. So this is SPC section 5.5 on disposal. And I would highlight the green text on the screen now where we have advice to say for the centralized procedure only, the list of national collection systems should be completed in the package leaflet only. And we've had some questions on that. And we do realize that this is a bit of a tricky one. So what we're doing is the EMA and CMDV are exploring the possibility of putting together reference documents which would collate the information on the national systems, in fact, for a couple of topics. The first one would be the national collection systems, which are mentioned in Article 117. And the next one would be on national reporting systems for adverse events, which are also mentioned in the package leaflet. So we are hopefully going to be able to put together lists of those national systems, which we would publish probably both on the EMA, at least on the EMA website with the Qld documents, and we could look to ways to incorporate those within the template or link from them going forwards. Just on the topic of adverse events, just to flag that the Q&A on describing adverse events in the SPC and package leaflet, which has been in place for a number of years, has been updated and republished. So that is on our website with the Qld documents. Another section of the package leaflet, which it can be a bit more complex, a bit tricky, is the package leaflet section 16, which is a consolidated list of contact details for the marketing authorization holder and the local representative. And the reason it's a bit trickier is because if you look in Article 14, which is the requirements for the package leaflet, there are several points in it which require contact details, and they were quite spread out. So we heard you during the public consultation on the Qld template, and we combined all of those contact details in one consolidated section, but it has resulted in a number of subheadings. And so I would just suggest to carefully follow the green text. And I do promise that if you stare at it for long enough, it will make sense, hopefully. One thing that hasn't changed, though, in the package leaflet is the mentioning of distributors. So if the distributor is not named as the local representative in the package leaflet, then distributors cannot be additionally named on the label or package leaflet. So that is an established principle that has not changed. And I'm going to add I promised one of my colleagues that I would add an extra comment with this slide. And so again, this is just a tip, and it probably goes against our protection of personal data. So it's probably why I shouldn't be allowed to present at these events. But when you are submitting your product information in the VRA GI18, or in fact any variation, and if you've put comments, electronic comments in the Word document, and we like comments because that tells us what you're doing, it's a good opportunity to explain something, but please don't remove the personal information on saving. I'm going to remove personal information from the file properties on save, because that leaves us with a nice set of anonymous comments, which is fine at the moment of submission. But at the moment when the rapporteurs and EMA start to comment on it, it gets to the point where nobody knows who's answering whose comments anymore. So if you could at least identify the company comments to the entity level, so we know it's from the company, that would be super helpful. Thank you. Right. I think we're in for a transition. Indeed, to Article 34, classification prescription status, which, as I mentioned, does appear on the SPC, but we're not, as I said, we're not dealing with that in the context of the Qld template. So as David Murphy explained yesterday, the CVMP guidance on this is under development, and it will include a public consultation. And so this is guidance on elaboration on the criteria within Article 34 to ensure that we can apply it in a consistent and harmonized way. So there's Article 34 within the regulation itself, but the point that I wanted to highlight today is that in addition to the actual Article 34 in the regulation, there is a respective section that is a little bit tucked away in Annex 2, the revised Annex 2 with the dossier requirements. So I'm not going to read it out, but it is in section 1.2.1. And essentially, it covers the situation where applicants are requesting a non-prescription status. And then there is this requirement for a critical review. So I just wanted to flag that up because certainly it's not something that I noticed straight away, and it's a little bit tucked away. So just to make you aware of it. And building on the practicalities of that a bit more, what to do in the situation where an applicant wishes to request non-prescription classification for their product, either at the time of initial authorization or as a post-authorization switch of prescription status, as we call it. Here are a few practical steps that applicants should follow. So the first thing is if you're requesting this at the time of initial marketing authorization, please tick the box for non-prescription in section 2.3 of the e-application form. So this indicates to the assessors that the applicant is making this request. If you're submitting this as a post-authorization switch of prescription status, then we know what you're requesting in any case, because for centralized products at least, there is a dedicated VRA with the GI6 classification that you would use for this switch. So it should be fairly obvious to us what you're trying to do. But then, and this is the key point linked to my last slide, do include the justification of non-prescription classification with this critical expert review according to the Annex 2 requirement. and we would suggest to include this, at least for now, within the critical expert report, which is a good place to put it, or as a separate, clearly labeled document within part 1 of the dossier, just so the assessors can clearly see what the document is and where that justification would be. And again, in case of uncertainty, please do contact us. Okay, again, moving to a topic which is, I mean, obviously claims are in the SPC, so we'll say that it's a linked topic. Prophylaxis claims, according to Article 107, paragraph 3. And here I'm only talking about existing antimicrobials. I think David Murphy mentioned yesterday as well that there is a CVMP reflection paper on prophylactic use under development. The public consultation ended, I think it ended at the end of April, and it's intended to be finalized sometime in July, potentially with a focus group meeting before finalization, depending a little bit what comments have come in from the public consultation. So looking at that, looking at prophylaxis claims in the context of authorized products, we've been looking at our centralized products, and there's really a relatively low number of impacted products. It's around 10. And what we are intending to do, because it's such a low number, is the EMA would be intending to proactively contact the affected marketing authorization holders to outline the proposed approach, which is still under discussion. But we would be likely to be asking to take regulatory action on this before the end of 2022, somehow within the context of a variation application. And the reason that this deadline is sooner rather than later is that there are no explicit transitional measures for Article 107, paragraph 3, unlike for the packaging and labeling. So, but we do recognize that since the respective CVMP guidance isn't yet finalized, that it wouldn't be fair to ask you to take action on that before that document is finalized. So, so that in order to be able to do it consistently. So once that document's finalized, we will contact you. And we've had a few comments about liaison with CMDV for a consistent approach, and just to reassure that that will indeed, in terms of the reflection paper, certainly be the case. Okay, again, total switch of topic, apologies. This is, I'm going to use the word renewals, even though we don't have them anymore, but just to put this in the right frame. So we don't have renewals anymore, just to reassure you again. And but we do have authorized products which still have a 5-year validity date on the marketing authorization. So that has to be dealt with. There has been a commission notice published, and I would hopefully it's all fairly clear, but I thought we'd go over it again just to be even more clear, hopefully. And so the first thing is that we have already contacted all marketing authorization holders of already authorized concerned products that have this 5-year validity date still on the marketing authorization. And we sought confirmation from you that the companies wanted to continue to switch to an unlimited MA validity. And we have replies to all of that. That's all fine. But there's another category of affected products, and these are the marketing authorization applications that were being assessed according to the transitional measures. So applications that were validated before the 28th of January this year, but which will finalize after the 28th of January. And those are still being finalized because they have to be finalized in accordance with the previous legislation. And so they still have the 5-year MA validity associated with it. So we will continue to request from those applicants that they wish for unlimited MA validity. So again, we will contact you. Hopefully you'll confirm that you want it. And then the confirmations for all of these products are sent by the EMA to the Commission in order for the Commission to update their Commission decisions, and they will remove the validity date in one or other of these 2 ways. either they'll take the opportunity at an upcoming variation requiring assessment when the decision is being updated anyway to remove the validity date, or if there would be no such procedure before the expiry of the MA, then it will be done as a standalone update. But the point is, there's no, once you've confirmed that you wish for unlimited MA validity, there's no further action required from marketing authorization holders, and everything will be updated in due course, and some indeed have been done already. And we will I think we will put a Q&A on our website shortly with the information more along the lines of this slide. Okay, if you'll excuse me, before we dive into data protection, I'm just going to have a sip of water. Okay, maybe I should have something stronger. So data protection. It is, well, it's Friday the 13th today, so it seems a good moment to start talking about this. And the first thing, but again, a caveat, is that this area has been discussed extensively, will continue to be discussed extensively, and we can all probably agree that the provisions within the regulation on data protection are going to give rise to different interpretations. And in this case, more than any other, I would say that the final position on interpretations will rest with the European Court of Justice. So that is a fairly usual rider that we say when covering interpretations. But it's definitely an important one in this case. So I'm going to start with the concept of the global marketing authorization. And this concept has existed for a long time, since 2004, I think. So it's not a new concept, but there appears to be an important difference between the previous and current legislation. So what I've got on the slide here is the Article 5, Paragraph 1 from the previous Directive 2001/82. And this was the paragraph introducing the global marketing authorization. I won't read it out, but I will just flag one part of it next to the text in pink, where basically it said any additional species, strengths, pharmaceutical forms, administration routes, presentations, and this is the key bit, as well as any variations and extensions. So whilst indications were not explicitly mentioned in this paragraph, the as well as any variations and extensions would have covered them, because they would have been indications added post-authorization would have been done via variation. So this, in the previous legislation, new indications were rolled into the GMA. Fast forward to, sorry, I can't seem to change my slide. Okay, fast forwarding to the regulation we have in place now, we have Article 38, Paragraph 3, which covers the concept of the global marketing authorization. And there is it's at first glance looks almost identical, but there is an important difference, and that is the text in bold in the middle of the paragraph now. So again, it's different. So these are post-authorization differences, often added post-authorization. So all these product developments, target species, strengths, pharmaceutical forms, administration routes, or presentations. But you see at the beginning of that sentence, it says that differ only with regard to. So that is a closed list. And there's no then mention of indications, of variations or extensions. So basically the items that we see are the closed list of additional parts that fall within the GMA. And it seems to exclude indications. So that is the current understanding, that the Article 38, Paragraph 3 is a narrower wording compared to the previous Article 5.1 of the directive, and that new indications added post-authorization would be excluded from the GMA. So that is definitely food for thought, and I won't go into it any further now. Sorry, just going back, an additional point to make is that this would fairly clearly be the case for marketing authorizations that have been approved after the 28th of January 2022, so that these marketing authorizations would be governed by the concept of the GMA according to the new regulation. And so that would mean that new indications would be subject to their own data protection period. We do need to seek further clarification how long that data protection period would be, but it's likely to be consistent with Article 39. We do also need further consideration of transitional measures for applying this new concept of the GMA to products that were approved prior to the 28th of January and for new indications that are added after the 28th of January. We do expect that the GMA according to Article 38.3 applies, but this still needs to be fully confirmed and will be further communicated. Okay, so now I will move to a different article on data protection, which is Article 40, paragraph 5. Again, the CVMP chair mentioned yesterday that this is an area where the CVMP is developing guidance because there are criteria within the article that would benefit from scientific elaboration. And the work on the CVMP reflection paper, as David mentioned yesterday, has been on hold for discussions on some of the principal points on interpretation of the article, but the work is now resuming actually in the next weeks, and it is we know that it's an area of importance. So for those of you who've been lucky enough never to read this article yet, Article 40, paragraph 5 provides for an additional period of protection of technical documentation, data protection, underpinning certain three very specific types of post-authorization development. And I'll just to say that if you look at the data protection articles, which are Articles 38 to 41, there are two types of data protection. One is prolongation of the original period of data protection, and then we have Article 40, paragraph 4 and 5, which provide for these additional periods of data protection. For example, once the original period of data protection has expired. So with Article 40.5, it is restricted to certain types of post-authorization product development, and there are certain criteria that are attached to this. For example, improving the benefit-risk balance of the product. So there will be detailed considerations on this within the CVMP reflection paper, which will of course be released for public consultation in due course. We did listen to comments received during the public consultation, actually on a different CVMP guidance on the concept paper for the benefit risk guideline. And there was, and there is an obvious link between the benefit risk guideline and Article 40, paragraph 5, where we talk about improving the benefit risk balance of the product. So we know there's a link, but we have decided against somehow merging all of this together for now, because for a variety of reasons, but primarily because it would delay the reflection paper on Article 40, paragraph 5, and that I think is in no one's interests at the moment. So coming back to the principal issues that were under discussion for a while, which paused the work, the main outstanding issues that were voiced by industry stakeholders were the issue of new target species and indications falling within the scope of Article 40, paragraph 5. I think in view of the previous slides on the global marketing authorization, where it looks like indications are fairly well catered for, I think we'll probably focus the discussion now on new target species. And then the second point was the acceptance of additional benefits as a way, as valid improvements to improve the benefit risk balance, which is one of the criteria of Article 40, paragraph 5. And I'll come on to that, those 2 points in more detail now. So the outcome of the discussions that we've been having are that post-authorization product developments that involve the requisite change under Article 40, paragraph 5 to one of three things: the pharmaceutical form, administration route, or dosage. So you've got to change one of those three things from the get-go. But one of those things which equally involves addition of a new indication or target species can in principle qualify for the application of Article 40, paragraph 5, and this is the key bit, provided that the relevant conditions are met. So to drill down to that a bit further, this could mean in practice that a new target species, the data for which is inextricably wrapped up with the data on the new pharmaceutical form, may be indirectly falling within the scope of Article 40, paragraph 5. But this is a more indirect route. And it's, I think, a point that is fairly clear is that a variation that involves the adding of a new target species would not automatically qualify for additional data protection under Article 40, paragraph 5, simply because there is an associated change of pharmaceutical form, administration route, or dosage. It is still going to be fundamental to demonstrate scientifically meeting at least one of the two criteria in the article, and there's criterion A, which is a reduction in antimicrobial or antiparasitic resistance that the product development is bringing, or B, an improvement of the benefit-risk balance. And we have noted, and you will see in the reflection paper, that because again, this was a comment from industry, that reducing antimicrobial or antiparasitic resistance, the approach for that can be quite a challenge. Showing that you've reduced the risk in antimicrobial and antiparasitic resistance is probably more well-known territory, and that can be accommodated within Article 40, paragraph 5, because here we're talking about improving the benefit-risk balance of the product, and the new definition of benefit-risk in the regulation incorporates the notion of reduction in the risk of antimicrobial or antiparasitic resistance. So that's quite a key point, and hopefully a useful one. So I'm going to talk a bit more about specific comments we've had in other fora from stakeholders. And I would like to stress that the act of adding +1 target species is not going to be automatically considered as having improved the benefit risk of the product. There will be further justification required, and we will elaborate in the draft reflection paper as far as possible on that point. Again, there were other possibilities put forward of, if the development reduces off-label use, does that improve the benefit-risk balance? And again, probably better to reframe that along the lines of unmet medical need rather than off-label use, because we can't assess against off-label use. Again, but this is an area that requires further consideration, and we will deal with that in the reflection paper as far as possible. I would say a positive step in view of comments received is that it is accepted that additional benefits are going to be a valid approach for improving the benefit-risk balance of the product, but that those changes should be in some way meaningful. And then lastly, the other approach to improving the benefit-risk balance is, of course, to reduce the risk. And in that scenario, if that's going to be the argument put forward, we would encourage that you demonstrate that the risk concretely existed and it was not reduction of a theoretical risk. I'll move on to some away from the more philosophical considerations of Article 40, paragraph 5, and onto some practicalities. So we do recognise that whilst the CVMP reflection paper is not yet available, an applicant may wish to still claim their right to data protection under the article, and these would be some of the practical steps to take in that scenario. So the first really key point is to submit the variation as normal. So you're not submitting the variation under Article 40, paragraph 5, it's submitted as normal, as a VRA by definition in this case, under the legal basis of Article 62. So VRA as normal for whatever the leading variation is, a change to the pharmaceutical form, a change to the administration route. There is a box in the e-application form for Article 40, paragraph 5, so please tick it. And that, again, is the first clue to the assessors that, that this is going to be part of this assessment. And then, even more importantly than ticking the box, is please provide a justification in the dossier as to how the product development covered by Article 40, paragraph 5, fulfills at least one of the specific criteria that I mentioned, so criteria A or B of the article. And we would suggest to include this for now, at least, within the critical expert report, or again, as a separate, clearly identified document in part 1 of the dossier. So If the box is ticked and but no justification has been included in the dossier, we will try to flag this during validation, although it's not going to be a validation blocking issue for the variation, because the rest of the variation can obviously carry on as normal. But we will advise you that without this justification, the CVMP would not be able to undertake that assessment of the specific facet of Article 40, paragraph 5, and therefore there would be no conclusion on that point. So that's the submission phase. In the assessment phase, the CVMP, as I mentioned, will assess the actual variation as normal, but will additionally assess, probably in a discrete part of the assessment report, whether the claim criterion of Article 40, paragraph 5 is considered to have been demonstrated based on the applicant's justification. One quite important point here is that the EMA or competent authority does not grant the additional data protection. So we are not going to provide a certificate at the end of this. As for any other period of data protection. Okay, I'll go back a step and just reiterate the second bullet on my slide one more time, which is a bit of a legalistic point, but it is an important concept, that a competent authority does not grant additional data protection. The CVMP is assessing whether the scientific criteria of Article 40, paragraph 5 have been met, and that's the conclusion that an applicant will see in the assessment report. I think that's the end of Article 40, paragraph 5. Oh gosh, sorry. Sorry, I think you can't see my presentation anymore. Or you can.
No, we cannot see it now.
Sorry. Now I'm having a personal disaster. Okay, is that back again?
Yeah, it's on now. Thank you.
It's on. Okay. All right. Probably a good moment to move on to something completely different, where I am totally out of my comfort zone, but we've included it for information, which is union interest referrals. So these are very similar to the referrals that we previously had under Article 35 of the Directive, but there are a few new elements introduced that we wanted to flag up, and these new elements are going to resemble the referral procedures a bit more on the human side. And the first change is that all product types can be included in the same referral. So we can have national products, so purely national MRP, DCP, or centralized products, all within the same referral. So that's the first new concept. The second thing is that the basic timetable for the referral has been extended to from 60 to 120 days. And there is the possibility for an additional 60 days. Now, whilst this all looks longer, from discussions with my colleague, if I understand correctly, because in the past we could have additional time anyway, basically this is adding up to the same time that has always been used, more or less, for referrals. So, but the basic timetable has been extended to 120 days. Another point that has changed, it's a bit of a subtle one, but we raise it anyway, is that in case of urgent risks that are identified to public or animal health or the environment that result in temporary safety restrictions, like suspending the marketing authorization, revoking, or taking some kind of restriction on the supply or use of the product, may also now be referred under a union interest referral, but this is no longer a mandatory step. So this is a may provision in the regulation. And we'll see how that goes. Another new point is that we are going to publish the Article 82 referrals on the EMA website under the medicines section at the very start of the procedure, and stakeholders are invited to provide comments which can be considered in the assessment. And then updates and further documents are published throughout the procedure as it goes on. And there's already an example, which is the procaine benzyl penicillin. Some practicalities, again, really important. And the first one may seem obvious, but it is an issue. and that is that we would really encourage the active participation of the marketing authorization holders whose products fall within the scope of the referral. And what we mean by active participation is submitting responses to the CVMP questions or list of outstanding issues, because obviously this input is crucial for the outcome of the procedure. Responses should be submitted to the EMA using the usual e-submission gateway that we use for everything else. But for those companies that are not already registered, please be aware that the registration process can take up to 20 working days, which is a long time. So if you're not already registered, please do so as soon as possible after receiving the start of procedure letter, so that you're in a position to submit the responses in time and not having to go through this registering process in a hurry. We will be developing Q&As on referrals in due course, which will be published on our website, which is quite good because we can also build in some practical experience. And I think that's the end of my presentation. And I possibly look at this point a bit like Garfield on this picture, and I suspect that many regulatory colleagues are looking a bit similar. But I will end with a quote from Oscar Wilde, which is that everything is going to be fine in the end, and if it's not fine, then it's not the end. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Emily. That certainly was a very granular presentation, but you did really well. We have a few questions into the chat, but what I would like to ask you is to put your hand up if you want to repeat the question, if this has not been addressed now into the chat. If it's not been addressed, please put your hand up. It might be on the benefit of everyone to hear your question. Okay, so the first hand up is from Hiltrud. Hiltrud, please, you're gonna be unmuted now. Okay, Hiltrud, you lower your hand, so we're gonna pass it to Karin then. Karin, please. Okay, we don't hear Karin, so maybe we can try with Patricia, see if we are the third lucky.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you hear me fine. So first of all, thank you very much to Emily for this very interesting and detailed presentation, which is for sure will be very, very helpful. Regarding the Qld V9 template. So thank you so much for thinking about centralizing the national information about take-back schemes and reporting systems for adverse events in a central location. I mean, this will be extremely helpful to everyone. My question was, what would happen with those PIs that have been already switched under the new Qld V9 template before this information is made available? So what would be the consequences for those products? Thank you.
Will there be a compilation of procedural guidance on these articles? Is there a plan to make a questions and answers or an update of the notice to applicants, as the Commission suggested yesterday more broadly? But I think for these articles, there's really a bit of a chaos and many developments going on. So we would really appreciate to have some sort of clear guidance and level playing field for everyone where to find the information. Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you, Asa, for the comment, and I'm not sure I can give a full reply, but I can certainly give my own comment and view, which is that in the old days, before the 28th of January, for these kind of issues, they were all included within the notice to applicants. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who still looks at it more or less every day for one reason or another. Although I do realize you'll be relieved to know that I am aware that we're under the new regulation now, so I'm not trying to look at your questions by reading the notice to applicants. But there are a lot of extremely useful principles in there on reference product, on data protection, on global marketing authorization, as well as references to ECJ rulings, which, let's not forget, over the last 20 years have shaped how we interpret data protection and the principles for generics and reference products. So I think Q&As from an individual competent authority on this really important topic would not be wise. I think we need to have a consensus view from all involved competent authorities and the Commission, with obviously the possibility of input from stakeholders, and that probably looks a lot like the notice to applicants. And I think yesterday the Commission and also Ivo mentioned that this is under discussion, but I think it is really important. But it needs to be a consensus position, not just one competent authority publishing questions and answers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Emily. Apparently there are some issues with the sound from the meeting room. I'm talking quite close to the mic. We'll see. Rick has a question. Rick Clayton has a question. Rick, may I ask you to speak to the audience and to explain your question? Thank you very much.
Yes, good morning, everybody. The question follows on really from Patricia's question on what happens next after the EMA has given the opinion on the protection of technical document following Article 40, paragraph 5. I'm just wondering how this is made transparent, how it is recorded. I don't know whether there's a place in the Union product database, for example, where this is sort of published. Can you explain how that works, Emily? Thank you.
Not at this point is the short answer to that, and I'm not going to pretend that we can. It's what I can say with certainty is that there is currently no field in the UPD that is in development or planned for this at this point. I think it's important to note that, for example, I mean, data protection is as I say, that nobody ever issues sort of certificates on this kind of thing. And if a new product is approved tomorrow, which has a new active substance, the working assumption is that that product has at least 10 years of a basic data protection period. We are transparent previously on our website, now in the UPD, when new product developments for products are authorized. It's also in our CVMP meeting output documents. So we are transparent in when we have approved what. Perhaps this is an area we need to look at. It's certainly an area that we also need to look at in terms of a traceability point of view, because we have this very tricky concept in the data protection articles in the regulation, that it is not just the resulting whole product development that benefits from these periods of additional data protection. It is discrete data sets. So in the case of Article 40, paragraph 5, it's the preclinical and clinical data that was associated with that variation. So we are talking about, as I say, discrete subsets of data within applications that benefit, or that can benefit from data protection, and that it is an area that we need to look at. And with Article 40, paragraph 4, it gets even worse because this is the MRL data protection, and then it's not only data that was in the MRL application, it's also data that is in the respective variation or marketing authorization application, again, preclinical and clinical data. So I think under development, Rick, is the answer to that question, I'm afraid to say.
Okay, so I don't see any more hands up or questions on the chat. So thank you very much, Emily. Again, you kept us dancing, even with very different songs on your presentation. So thank you very much. Josh, I can see you're already online. So the next session is going to be presented by Joe Zollars. It's going to be about pharmacovigilance. Many of you will know Josh. Josh has been doing pharmacovigilance now for many, many years. I think from 2000 probably. And he's now the head of the Service of Veterinary Risk and Surveillance. And I don't think I need further introduction for Josh. So Josh, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordi. You hear me well?
Very well.
Okay, very good. So good morning still to all of you. After Emily has managed to fire you up, it's my turn. And the team will be a little bit similar to Emily's presentation in the sense that we also have tried to listen and to gain already the experience of the last few months. So this presentation is also trying to give you the latest insight on interpretation and trying to help you to give you some more reassurance, clarification, expectations on what are the specific requirements on pharmacovigilance, and in particularly focusing on signal management. So it will be some detail, I'm afraid, as well in the following slides. And for a number of you who were present at the joint implementation group meeting last week, some of it will be a repetition, but I hope this is okay. So the first slide is just a recall of the main elements of the legislation on the collection and recording. So we've gone through 30-day submissions, including now all the non-serious cases. On top of that, we expect the yearly sales. In terms of the main new element is continuous adverse event analysis by the companies called signal management. And it's allowed to use the own database, but also the EVVET database. What the requirement is, 1 yearly signal detection analysis is required on the EVVET database. And for each product in the EU, we're expecting to see MAH statements, a yearly MAH statement, and signal management outcomes can be submitted into a database. Now, the regulatory oversight will be done through pharmacovigilance inspections, and also the regulators will follow a risk-based approach on their own signal surveillance. And the legislation then includes also the possibility to do ad hoc targeted surveillance. And in terms of inspections, there is the new element of the pharmacovigilance master file, and includes now also a part detailing a requirement on a quality management system. What's not on the slide is also important to note that the Pharmacovigilance Working Party as such has now been established as serving in the legislation CVMP and CMDV. So it's not entirely like a PRAC, but it has some similarities in terms of responsibilities, I would say. So this was a short overview of, and most of you know these main elements of the legislation. So the following slides are really focusing on the new element of signal management. So the requirement is to continuously monitor the benefit-risk balance, and the companies can use their own database or the Union Pharmacovigilance database. At least once per year, you should do one signal detection analysis in the EVVET database. Signal detection should be done within 2 months before the due date, and I get to the issue of the due dates a little later. The aim is to detect new potential signals, and signals detected and validated should be assessed and submitted in IRIS. IRIS is a platform that many of you know already from scientific advice, and there's a new module there now which is called the Veterinary Signal Management module. That's the one that can be used for submitting the signals and the annual statements. If we look at what type of signals there are mainly 2 types of signals, those with already an identification of a change of benefit risk. These should be submitted within 30 days to IRIS, and we have made available a signal assessment template that can be used with the submission to include your analysis and to help you with structuring the actual analysis of this signal. The other signals, where there's no immediate new risk or changes to the benefit risk, they can be submitted at any time before the due date in IRIS. But also, if you have data coming in just after the due date, you can also submit them then. We expect that many companies will wait for such signals to be submitted up to the due date, which is fine because you will be waiting for, is there any new similar information coming in that might change the benefit risk? And so the message here is at any time you can submit a signal that you have identified. What is a signal? It's an important slide. This is the definition that is in the Implementing Act. A signal is defined as information that arises from one or multiple sources. Sorry, I'm reading it because it's important, including observations and experiments which suggest a potential new causal association or a new aspect of a known causal association between an intervention and an adverse event, or a set of related adverse events that is judged likely to justify further investigations of possible causality. So when we try to analyze what's in this sentences, what we take out of it, it's about identifying new information, and a signal is a hypothesis. It does not always translate into potential causal association, and that's inherent to the type of data that we're also dealing with. These are observational data, and it's very often very difficult to really establish a causal association. So it's most of the time it's a hypothesis. And the signal, and I will come to that many times in the next slide, is not defined by a disproportionate ROR. That's the reporting odds ratio in a database. This might help you to filter down, but these are only statistical methods there to complement the qualitative analysis. So continue on signal. So signal is, there's no single approach on the method. ROR, again, is only a prioritization tool. Does not mean a potential signal. We ask you to focus, and that's why we have a quite restrictive list of medically important terms that should help you to identify those signals that are those terms that you want to focus on first. So what's important also, even if you don't have a red light disproportionate ROR, then it's still possible that you need to investigate. That does not mean that you don't have a signal there. Other criteria to consider are seriousness, severity, outcome, etc. And always, it's important that once you start analyzing, you're expected, and that this is, of course, the main advantage of using a database overall, that you then look at the cumulative cases of the whole life cycle of a particular product. Few slides on the refuted signals. So we expect that, and we see that already on the data that are coming in, that many of the signals are refuted, and that's absolutely normal, because most of the time issues are coming up in adverse events. Sometimes when your product is concomitant product, obviously, then most of the time, actually, the signals are refuted. It turns out that the adverse event is not really related, or it cannot be established to be related to the use of a particular product. Nevertheless, we have seen some data coming in that have very limited information. So we still expect, if you have signals that are refuted and they're submitted, the requirement is still to submit them to IRIS. That is a kind of a brief summary, and we have an example on the next slide. If you have, and it can be the case, that you're doing a really in-depth assessment, you can still also use the template that is being provided. So if you have a lot of data, but after your assessment, you come to the conclusion that it's refuted, then please use your analysis, use the template, so you can also include, also for the refuted signals, that your analysis into the signal. And as an example, to the minimum type of information, and it's good enough to have just a short paragraph, is some information on the number of cases you have looked at, a little bit of a summary of what you have reviewed, and the conclusion. So this slide gives you a short example of this, what we would be expecting to see when a refuted signal is coming in. Last slide, and again, to reiterate, on the left side, you see it's just visually representing an output generated with the data warehouse for a particular product. And when you have a product that is a successful product, like many antiparasitics, you often have a lot of adverse event data coming in, or you have a non-steroidal that is used on sick animals. You often have a lot of reports coming in. When you run the report in the data warehouse, this is what you're faced with. So sometimes you see a lot of red on the ROR, the reporting odds ratios. And the message is, again, please, they don't automatically mean that these are signals. They are just there to help you then ordering and prioritizing and focusing first on the medically important terms. And we will be giving that same message also to our colleagues working in inspections, because that's where we understand is the fear from the industry that these outputs will then be at inspections could be used to double check what the company really has done. So from our side also, there will be a lot of flexibility. This is what we were faced with for the last about 10. We were doing signal detection for the centrally authorized products. This was typically also our problem when we had a lot of signals and had to focus and had to prioritize. And we understand you're in the same situation, certainly now going into signal management. So also from the regulators, there will be flexibility allowed. Few slides on the due dates. So due dates are there. I think were also requested and proposed by the industry, and they help both us and yourselves to facilitate and to coordinate the work. This is not something that is in legislation, it's really to organize our work. The due dates, what do we expect by the due date is that we receive a statement, the annual statements confirming the benefit risk balance of the products, and the one that where you confirm compliance with the published VGVP guidelines. So what we have seen is that some people then try to, in the statement, also include the annual statement signal review. So you can include an attachment to a statement, but that is really not the intention. Just a statement, the statement submission is just a statement. Anything else that relates to signals should be submitted separately, and that's why we emphasize can be submitted, all the signals can be submitted during the year prior to the due dates, and also just immediately after the due dates. It's always data driven. Once you have new data coming in where you think this is a signal, that gives you an opportunity to submit it. So the statements as such should not come in with any information about the actual signals that you have been reviewed. The statements are purely separately. Yeah, I think that's what I've covered everything on the slide. This is a bit some same elements. By the due date, annual statement should have been submitted. This slide indicates that there is, of course, always, again, also some flexibility. If you have a work organization that is a little bit different within your company and you want to submit earlier, that is not an issue. That's not a problem. But it is, you have to be compliant, unfortunately, with regulations. So for the whole life cycle of a product, the legislation is quite clear for all the products. Even if you have a very stable pharmacovigilance profile after many years, you would still have to submit your statement on a yearly basis. For the moment, we have published the due dates for the CAPs. We are almost there and will be publishing very shortly the ones to give you an indication for the nationally authorized product DCP and MRPs, and many of you have raised this question to us. Again, signals can be submitted to IRIS already at any time, and overall signal detection as such, signal management is a continuous process. So 2 summary slides on signal management, repeating again. The focus of the signals should be new information. There's no obligation to assess historical data. For the first analysis, you're advised to select the time period from the last DLP of the last PSUR and presented to look the data, the cases reported during this period in the context of all cumulative cases. Again, once you have identified new information from the latest submission of adverse event reports, and you think this is a signal, you're expected to include also into your analysis older cases from the life cycle of the product. So there's no need to start looking for potential signals for which you have no new recent cases. And also there's no need to send again signals that you have been dealing with previously, old issues that you have analyzed in past PSURs. So once you have dealt with certain types of information, there's no need to include them again as signals. If a signal is detected based on new cases, a cumulative review, including all cases, should be performed. Again, the last bullet point is about using the full set of data that you have available in your own database or in EVVet. Last slide on that element. Again, flexibility should be allowed. Each signal is different. There's no simple guide on what to do with each signal, as products are very different and the cases reported and all evidence that supports a signal. Sound clinical judgment should always be used. Focus on the medically important terms, and knowledge and expertise will grow with practical experience. So we're all learning every day dealing with this, and that's the same for the regulators. Within the group of the PSMAC, I'll come to that, we have a dedicated group of experts. We also exchanging our experiences and our ways of working. And we hope to do that together with the industry to learn also from your approaches. We don't claim that we have the holy grail on knowing how it should be done. Briefly, a pilot signal management expert group was started. It includes 12 members. 1 member is from the agency, 11 from member states experts. The pilot is taking place over 2 years, and it's an operational group that was set up to test new processes through close cooperation of a group of member states experts. The aim is to have an overall sustainable regulatory operational framework in the topic of pharmacovigilance to support the pharmacovigilance provisions. So it's an operational group that, and I think it's one of the legacies of the previous chair now, David Murphy, who really thought it was, who really brought this initiative forward, and we developed it, and I think it's starting to work well. So what is this group doing? This group is really central in picking up, and this is a process slide where a company is submitting a signal with a recommendation for amending the product literature. So a typical change of adding a warning. So this group is picking up these signals. The signals are prioritized within the group or distributed on a 2-weekly basis. They have meetings. They discuss the analysis of the dedicated person who has picked up this signal. He's making an assessment. He's working directly normally on the template that is being used by the company to submit the signal. And from the recommendation that is done at that 2-weekly meeting, that recommendation goes to the Pharmacovigilance Working Party with the representatives of all the member states, including the rapporteur. At the Pharmacovigilance Working Party is now the key group of experts that is proposing the way forward. We still can go back to the company with proposals for, like we always do most of the time, a change of wording for the product literature. It will always go through the PSMAC. So PSMAC is the operational group on a day-to-day basis dealing with the signals coming in. Once we have cleared the discussions at the working party, we then still go, but normally not for extended discussions like we currently have. So the discussions should have been taking place already at the working party, and we go for endorsement, a formal endorsement at CVMP, and depending on the type of product at the CMDV, and the company is informed accordingly. We are still working out the detailed process overall, and particularly also the process on how then to move forward from such recommendation to the implementation through a variation. What we're looking at is the way it was implemented through PRAC. PRAC is using the type 1A, and the relevant vehicle that we have under the current legislation, the new legislation, is the VNRAs. So we anticipate that most of these type of variations will go through as a VNRA. We're working on it. It's to be confirmed. So we will let you know the detailed process. It's not excluding the possibility of a VRA. So legally, the legal assessment is that both are possible. Most likely approach will, and that's what we're already using for a number of those, is the VNRA option. The tricky issue there is about the translations, and on the human side, those translations are being done by the agency and are published publicly on the website, and all the relevant companies that have a particular substance that was the subject of a signal then are invited to use those published translations and to use them to update their and to submit the type 1A, and for us to submit the VNRA. So the similar process, we're looking into it. It needs to receive some more formal agreements and some, of course, it includes also financial commitments from the agency doing this, these translations, because that it would also be providing translations for non-caps. So just to make you understand that what the little hurdles are still to complete that process, but we'll let you know. So this is what we have received currently since the last 28th of January and yesterday. We have received 49 annual statements and 45 signals. The signals, if you look at the signals, most of them are expectedly are refuted. Some of them are submitted for close monitoring, and a number of them come already with proposed changes to the product information. And we have 4 of them just now received that relate to non-caps. Most of the information received currently is about centrally authorized products, because that's also related to the due dates. So the signals are, some of the signals are actually because we have prompted companies that from the exercise that we have done for many years now on centrally authorized products of signal detection, we have adverse events that we were monitoring. So we have advised companies for particular products and told them, please, by the first due date, we expect you actually to focus on such and such adverse event, and we expect you to submit an update through a signal. So that's part of what we have already received. Some of the signals already are, because there was new information, adverse events coming in, so are really signals that are not left over from PSURs or from recommendations from regulatory side. So it's dripping in now every day, and it will grow now quickly. We anticipate the submission of the signals, also with the release of the due dates for the non-caps. This was a slide that some of you maybe remember that I've used before, but that was only one line there. And the idea was that everyone is always referring to the burden of pharmacovigilance and activities, and that we were expecting, of course, with the new process and the new procedures and the new systems in place, that will increase the burden first in 2022. That's what we're seeing. That is expected. There's nothing new there. And we acknowledge, and that's the red line, that this will extend a little further. We're still working on important processes. We're still working on important improvements of the systems for ourselves and for the submission. But equally important, I think, for the slides, I hope you agree with me that what we're also definitely phasing out now is the PSURs. So quite a number of these PSURs we all agreed were perhaps not so informative, were more of administrative procedures. So at least we're leaving that era behind us, and we can focus on data-driven analysis and data-driven issues. Briefly about IRIS. So you know that we are working internally to bring important improvements to the reporting tool. So there are two elements. One, there's a portal that companies will be using for submission, but there is also a management tool that allows us to deal with the large number of signals that will come in. For sure, not now, but soon we will be struggling how to manage it, and we need important tools, and so this is still ongoing another 2 months. Once this is done for the portal, we will be updating our tutorials, probably organize also a new webinar to make sure that we can help you and that these improvements show that it is the first feedback that we have received from companies using the actual submission. It's not without bugs still, but that it is kind of rather simple to use. So we're trying to improve this still. Briefly about the joint implementation group. The joint implementation group, a first meeting was last week. It's a group that has some historic value. That many years ago we had a similar group in place where we were sharing with the industry technical implementation matters. We had open discussions. So there's the same principle we're trying to apply now, and we have organized 3-4 years. So all industry representatives interested in pharmacovigilance are invited. Previously we were working only with representatives, but now where it's a virtual meeting, we have no problem for anyone joining from the industry the discussions. What we intend to discuss is not the purely technical EVVET data warehouse IRIS issues. If you have bugs, then please report them still through the help desk. But the issues that we're discussing are about interpretation, matters of principle, day-to-day experiences on the in the fields of the adverse event reporting, signal analysis, and the actual submissions of the signal annual statement submissions. Whenever possible, please try to organize yourselves industry, so come up with representative issues, so issues that you share that are not very very company specific. That doesn't mean that you can always reach us and send particular questions. Of course, we're there to try to help you if you have any issues, and use the help desk. And many of you know how to do that in the meantime. My last slide is to introduce, maybe we've never done that before, to put a little bit of faces to the small team that I'm working with on the topic of pharmacovigilance. All people trying to support you. So Raquel, you know very well, very long time on the agency, responsible for mainly for the working party. Kilkiria and Daniel, still very recent. Also the scientific staff of our group. Kilkiria, lots of experience on the human side in pharmacovigilance. The same for Daniel, also experience on the human side, but working within the agency. Kilkiria from the industry, a human perspective. Then Laura is our backbone on anything technically related, building the new data warehouse queries, everything related to vigilance. So, and she's the only one, and we have to cherish her. But many of you know that any technical issues always are dealt with by Laura. Stephanie and Vessi are our secretaries, support, and a lot more. It's not only about organizing the meetings, but also trying to now to manage the different signals. And then Manuela, also with a scientific background, Manuela is supporting us for the moment on the important work on recoding. So since November, and Manuela will be with us still with another 6 months, I think, trying to recode all the adverse events to the product data coming in the UPD, which is essential because otherwise the industry cannot analyze the data as long as it's not connected, of course. So this shortly gives some faces to the people that you have been interacting to. Thank you very much. That was my last slide, and very happy to answer questions that are perhaps already raised. I didn't follow the chat. That's for you. Go ahead, Jordi.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let's do something. And we will have hopefully a bit of time at the end, depending on how Sonia managed to do the next presentation, because if you allow me, the Poon, you're the one who allowed to put on fire the chat. So you have a few questions in there. So check the questions. What I would like to ask is participants to raise their hand after the presentation from Sonia, and then we can discuss those directly. So the next presenter is Sonia Schwab. She's a veterinarian who worked also at the University of Vienna for a few years. In 2010, she started working in the veterinary pharmaceutical industry in Richter Pharma. And since 2018, she's the team leader of the preclinical and clinical development group. She's also a member of the EBV3 product owners group and VCIAG, and is representing the industry in the development and improvements of the new veterinary IT system. So Sonia, all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So thank you very much for this opportunity to share the industry's perspective on our experiences we gained so far during I think it's been 105 days since we started operating under the new regulation. So let's talk about what industry has been experiencing since then. Yeah, it's a complete new era for pharmacovigilance in the veterinary sector. A lot of our processes have changed, the systems have changed, and yes, one of the objectives of this big change was a reduction of the administrative burden. As Joss already pointed out, we are clearly not there yet, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and we're still optimistic that at some point, not as early as initially expected, but eventually we will get there, and it will become easier on all of us. But yes, as I said, we're not there yet. We all have to update our processes. The systems have to be aligned. So of course, at the moment, there is quite the opposite. There's an increase in the resource requirement, but that should be just transitory. Yes, with the 28th of January, we started in this new era, and although officially there is no implementation or transitional phase, we have to acknowledge that we are very much in a testing phase. We had the finalized guidance available rather shortly before this date in January, and there was very little opportunity to test the new systems beforehand. So yes, although we are in the live system, it is a learning by doing, and I think that applies to everyone, not just the MHs. And we need time to implement and test and optimize our own systems. I would really like to say thank you, especially to the EMA, that there's been the opportunity for industry to get involved long before this implementation date. There are a lot of groups where industry has been able to participate, to develop the guidelines, be involved in the working party group, Pharmacovigilance, and also on the technical side in the development of the new systems like EMA Vet3. At the beginning of 2021, industry POs were invited to join this product owners group. We were able to do user acceptance testing and already give feedback of industry new in the development phase. And this is going to be continued now with a continuation of some of those groups and implementation of some new groups where we could join, like the Veterinary Medicine Product Regulation System Improvements Advisory Group, and also in the JIC where we can still discuss ongoing issues. So really thank you for this opportunity that we can share our view there. And through industry representatives, all company sizes and their differences in workflows are represented. So from the small up to the large one, multinational, they're all heard there. And really like to encourage this continued involvement of industry. It's really very beneficial, I believe, to both sides. Yeah, the new IT systems. I personally can say I was quite nervous before the 28th, considering how many different organizations would try to access the system on the same day. It went really well, I think. I think most of us could connect, and so the kickoff was successful. And we also have to acknowledge that, and that has been said beforehand, that this is only a minimal viable product. So yeah, of course, it's not perfect yet. So there's certainly room for improvement. And the first point on this slide, I know Ines keeps pointing it out, and I think it's a continued thorn in the side of the EMA, because yes, UPD has been deployed and it's functional, but the database is only as good as the data in it. And so while industry likes to point out that UPD is not fully functional, that refers, of course, to the data there. I know it's improving. A lot of data has been entered over time, and it's getting better every day. But yes, it impacts the operations in pharmacovigilance, and it's really important to us to get this finalized so we can have reliable data there. Also want to say thank you that really the industry proposals are considered constructively, that the IT development and support team of EMA is really considering our feedback and providing solutions for the issues we raise. That's really a very good cooperation, I would say. Of course, these systems have to be suitable for all stakeholders, so we cannot get every single wish we have. But I think we are reaching good compromises that will, in the end, suit all of us. And we also have to admit, I think, and that's the feedback I get from colleagues from throughout our organizations within Access VetMed, that while we are still learning how to use these databases to understand what kind of answers we get for the queries we put, and also while we are still encountering some bugs, we are not yet fully confident, or we do not fully trust yet the results we get. It's still a learning process, but we also have to say, have to experience that the development team and also very much the EMA service desk is very rapid in the response and in trying to resolve any issues. So that as well seems to be working really, really good. What have we learned so far from the systems we've been working with? Yeah, first point again, the UPD data entry is not complete, and that's the main improvement we have there. Expectation for improvement we have there yet, that this is completed, that all product data in the sufficient quality is there, so we can also use all queries in EVWeb and data warehouse that depend on information being there in the UPD. I think one of the first points raised, because obviously this was also the first tasks we had when we started working with the new system, was looking for the reports concerning our organization in EVWeb. And while the basic search functionalities were there, we immediately raised several suggestions for improvement. And as some of you might have already noticed, on Wednesday, the first set of improvements on search criteria in EVWeb for the adverse event report search has already been deployed in the production system. So that's already a step forward in making our life easier finding the reports that are relevant for us. Also, an issue that has been raised rather early on is that, especially that concerns, of course, the companies that have a lot of cases per day. And for those, this manual process of downloading the cases is rather resource intensive. Also, there an improvement is under development, and this will be made easier in the future. Signal detection evaluation tools can be expected to be evolving over time, depending on the experience we gain now, the feedback we give. There is a rather decent set of dashboards available at the moment. We can ask a lot of queries, look at data from different angles. I'm sure the more queries we run, the more suggestions we have for improvements. And the impression I get from the discussions is that the development team is open to further add filters, dashboards, whatever appears to be required in the future. And as Charles already said, the IRIS portal, I think the initial release was really a very basic model, and that's going to be adapted. I'm very much looking forward to that. And really thank you to the EMA IT development team, that they're really very good at coming back at us with suggestions for improvement for the issues we raised. So that's really working well. Yes, so on the new principles and pharmacovigilance in general and the requirements, there's a lot of resources being put at the moment into adapting our processes, how we change what we do in our day-to-day work, and this will take for sure quite some time still. I think the feedback again that I get, the main uncertainties, and there's certainly a reason why Joss also pointed this out in his presentation, is signal management and detection. A lot of us, especially the smaller companies, have not been using databases like EVVet and the data warehouse that is there right now. So we really have to learn a completely new way how to do it. And while the basic principles are clear, the guidance is there. It's still difficult for a lot of us to figure out the best way to implement this to fulfill all the requirements set by the regulation and the guidances. So yes, Charles already said there is probably going to be further webinars on the data entry into IRIS, so that's very welcome. And we would also very much like to see some more practical guidance on signal management and detection. Yes, of course, every product is different, and there cannot be one fixed set of rules how to do it. But I think we would all benefit very much from some practical examples, really hands-on, to get a bit of a better understanding how this is expected to, so that in the end we find the right signal. I think, I mean, the big ones, they will come out. So I'm not afraid that they are going to be overlooked. But I think it might rather be in the other direction, that when we are not certain, we rather call it a signal and submit it and refute it afterwards. And the burden is then not only on us, but also on those that have to review all the data we submit. So maybe some more guidance there would be beneficial to all involved. Yeah, the way forward, do not lose sight of the objective of the regulation. Really need to get to this reduction of the administrative burden, but I think that concerns not only the MHs, that's the same for NCAs and I'm sure for EMAs. So I hope together we keep an eye on that. I keep repeating myself. Yes, please finalize the registration of the products in UPD. So we have a completely functional system there, a database there. As I said, the good dialogue and the communication is very much appreciated. So please keep up this open channels and this joint effort on developing and implementing the new pharmacovigilance systems. As I said, some more guidance would be very much appreciated through an industry, I dare say. And yes, Joss already used the word as well, flexibility. While we're learning, we're doing everything in our power to be compliant, but of course there's a lot of new stuff going on, and especially looking at upcoming inspections. Please have patience and allow some flexibility. We are, I think, on a regular basis, we are reviewing our processes, we are improving them as we go along, and make our first experiences in the new regulation. And so hopefully NCAs will see this and understand this when we're not perfect in every aspect yet. We are trying our best to get there. So yes, that's a short feedback from the industry. Thank you very much again for this possibility to be here today and for the good cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sonia. And thanks also for the positive words towards the IT solutions that we are implementing and slowly improving. It's very much appreciated, certainly. We don't have that much before the coffee break, so I'm going to suggest that Joss answers during 5 minutes some of the questions on the chat. And after 5 minutes, I would like to stop for a digital break, something that the agency insists now, that we need to have digital breaks, time to have coffee. And after the 2 heavy sessions we have had, I think it will be good. So Joss, 5 minutes, the rest could be answered in writing. Thank you.
Yes, very well, Jordi. I will do that. Just stop me then. I will just read them and go through a number of those. And thank you very much, Sonia, for and we definitely will pick up on one of the main elements is on training. And we were originally we wanted to have more material ready. It's really depending on the IRIS update that is required, because everything will come down to also submission. And so once we have that available and we can update the tutorials, we will definitely progress with another training. So that's on the topic of the training. So I'll go through a few of the many questions, but I will answer all those in the chat as well later on then. If the pharmacovigilance working party has requested the MEH to thoroughly monitor specific signs, the MEH should report this monitoring through the signals and using the template in IRIS. That's a question by Maria. Yes, please, if possible. I mean, if it's a straightforward refuted signal, of course, you would be welcome to just have a short description of what you have done, like what was in the slides. If you have more, I mean, the same principle apply. There's no obligation to use the template, but on the ones that you have been requested to review, of course, we expect some feedback, some evidence that the conclusion that you're reaching on the signal is really substantiated with the analysis that you have done. And for this, the template is available. So Sarah Bodeby is another question. When can we expect to be able to use the data warehouse for nationally authorized products? Yesterday, you've seen that many products have now been updated. We realized that there was one company that was trying to submit certain signals for a nationally authorized product and they couldn't find the product. So if you're in that case, please contact us. We then managed to find the product and there were issues with the database. So this is evolving day to day, and actually most of the important products we anticipate actually to be in the system. If it's not the case, let us know and we'll try to find a way forward, probably also then with the particular member state if we really have to include the product. Because if you're in a situation where you need to submit an issue with the benefit risk change, you obviously you have a legal requirement, and we need to find a way forward for those cases. Frederik Nordeman, on a slide it was stated that to use the signal report from a new risk and changes in benefit risk. Should the signal report form also be used for validated signals submitted continuously during the year? Yes, the signal report, again, it's a similar answer maybe. So for any signal that you're submitting, you have the template available. If it's a refuted, often we understand you would not be able, you would not do a full set of analysis using the template, and then a paragraph is sufficient, and we advise to just look at the example that is part of one of the slides. Maybe the last one from Rosa Kalongi. When we use the data warehouse, should we consider the VEDRA terms in bold as MI terms, or should we follow the terms published in the current guideline? Indeed, for the moment, the MI terms, we don't have a possibility to highlight them easily in the data warehouse. Laura is working on that, but maybe we can show that in the next training if it's available then. But your reference for the MIT terms is in the guideline. So Jordi, you want to go for a break, and then I will make sure that I will answer the others directly in the chat.
Thank you very much, Josh. That's a great idea. So let's have a break until 11:25, according to the agenda, when we are going to have a presentation from Brendan Cuddy on GMP. So have a nice coffee. Thank you very much. All right, welcome back to everyone. I can see that Josh has been answering some of the questions on the chat. That's great. Thank you very much, Josh. It's Friday in early lunchtime, so we're not going to delay any longer the last presentation of this info day. So it's my pleasure to introduce Brendan Cuddy. Brendan joined the agency in 2002. He's a chemist, and Brendan is currently the chairman of the Good Manufacturing and Distribution Practice Inspectors Working Group, and I'm sure that those of you who are involved in GMP recognize him. So Brendan, all yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this info day. It's a great pleasure to have this opportunity to address so many participants this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are in the world. Yeah, as Jordi said, I'm currently the chair of the Inspectors Working Group, and I thought I'd start by just introducing the work of the Inspectors Working Group to you. So the IWG, it's a working group of the agency that aims to increase harmonization amongst member states in inspectional practices and procedures, and also to establish harmonized guidelines for industry operating in the environment. The IWG is chaired by the agency, and it is made up of senior inspectors from every member state in the EU and in the EEA. It's also attended by the European Commission, and it's observed by inspectors from countries where we have mutual recognition or other international agreements. So, for example, Switzerland, Japan, America, New Zealand, Australia, Israel, Canada, and the United Kingdom all send observers to the IWG. We also have observers from international partner organizations such as WHO and EDQM, and also we have an observer, a representative from PICS, the Pharmaceutical Inspection Cooperation Scheme, who also participates in the meeting. The IWG has a triple mandate to the EMA, in terms of developing inspections, practices and procedures, primarily in relation to the centralized procedure, but also in relation to inspections in third countries. It also has a mandate to the Commission in terms of developing GMP guidance and also providing GMP expert input into the development of international agreements with third countries. And then finally to the heads of medicines agencies in terms of developing quality manuals and quality systems for the inspectorates in the member states and then overseeing the audit program to ensure that those quality manuals and quality systems are implemented in the member states in a consistent fashion. The IWG then covers the manufacture and distribution of medicines for human and for veterinary use, and it covers medicines that are marketed as well as medicines that are used as investigational medicinal products, and it also covers active substances as well. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. The IWG then also serves as a kind of a telematic steering group that oversees the maintenance and development of the UDRA Gmdp database. And in this database, the member states enter manufacturing and wholesale dealer authorizations, GMP and GDP certificates and non-compliance statements, registrations of manufacturers, importers and distributors of active substances, and also information in relation to inspections of third country manufacturing sites, which is used to facilitate cooperation on inspection planning. The UDRA Gmdp database, of course, it's an important element of how the network secures the supply chain for veterinary medicines as well as human medicines. Next slide, please. So currently the GMP itself is laid down in 2 directives covering both human and veterinary medicines. For veterinary medicines, the relevant directive is Directive 91412 EC. And this directive, if you're familiar with it, you'll know it's quite a high-level document and really outlines what are the key principles that a manufacturer should take into account when setting up their quality system. But more detailed interpretation of those guidelines is given in volume 4 of UDRALEX, and this is the rules governing medicinal products in the European Union. And volume 4 is divided into 4 parts. I'm really only going to talk about 3 parts, but part 1 is kind of general chapters setting out in more detail the principal parts of quality management that should be applied. Part 2 covers the same ideas but applied to active substances. Part 3 talks about in more detail some of the technical requirements, and in some cases is very product specific in relation to what kinds of products are manufactured. And then part 4 is GMP for advanced therapy medicinal products for human use. So I'm really just going to talk today about part 3 and specifically on the next slide, please. I'm going to talk about Annex 4 and 5 of Part 3. So as I said, Part 3 sets out detailed technical requirements, covering specific process types or product types, and together with parts 1 and 2 and 3 may apply simultaneously. So Annex 4 covers manufacture of veterinary medicinal products other than immunological veterinary medicinal products. And then obviously Annex 5 covers the manufacture of the immunological veterinary medicinal products. In addition to being common to the member states of the European Union and the EEA, Annex 4 and 5 are also common to the participating authorities of the Pharmaceutical Inspection Cooperation Scheme. And you can find in this hyperlink who is part of that scheme. But it consists of not only the EEA member states, but also, for example, North American countries such as Canada, USA, South America, Brazil, Argentina, and so on, through to Asia, where you have Taiwan and Korea, amongst others. So a more global cooperation scheme. So when we talk about updating Annex 4 and 5, it's important to remember that we need to have a coordinated approach, and therefore we have established a drafting group which is drawn from the EEA IWG members, but also co-opting as well members of the PICS working group on veterinary medicinal products to ensure that we have a harmonized approach right from the outset in terms of the drafting of GMP guidance. Next slide, please. So why are we revising Annex 4 and 5? Well, they were originally published in 1992 and have not been updated since publication. So already there's a good argument for modernization. And of course, since 1992, there have been many developments in the area of international regulation and guidance. For example, to take into account many of the principles that are coming through from the ICH processes, so Q8, Q9, Q10, and Q11, also whatever has the equivalent from the veterinary side as well. In addition to that, there have been developments in new areas of technology, new processing methods, and new products which maybe have not previously been covered. Again, due to the age, there may be ambiguities in interpretation or just changes in definition or understanding of definitions and terminology over the years. And finally, then, looking at extending the scope of the guideline to cover manufacture and import of investigational veterinary medicinal products used in veterinary clinical trials. And again, that is an area where it could be that we will develop some recommendations here in a guideline, but its application may vary depending on national legislation in member states. So next slide, please. Thank you. So where are we now? Well, we started in 2020 looking at these two annexes, and the IWG and PICS agreed to start work on concept papers that would provide the basis for future revision. And those concept papers were drafted through 2020 and 2021. and were adopted by the IWG and by the PICS committee in September and October of last year. We then had a 3-month public consultation on those 2 concept papers, which concluded just after Christmas this year. Last year, and we have been currently reviewing the comments we have received during that public consultation. And following that, we have also started with the drafting work. So next slide, please. So in terms of the feedback we received on the concept papers, although we received only a small number of comments, and these are the contributing organizations here, and a special thanks to those for taking the opportunity to contribute. I think it's a good cross-section of different types of products, different parts, different sectors of the industry. So I think we've already got a very useful feedback from this first initial consultation on the update of those guidelines. So next slide, please. We can see that in terms of the feedback, I think it's important to say that I think we had very good support, very strong support for reviewing these annexes. Of course, we also received some reminders of the specific context of the veterinary domain and the needs of the veterinary sector, which were said to differ substantially from those of the human sector in relation to medicinal products. And you can see here that many of these concepts in terms of drivers for investment, the fragmented market, price setting mechanisms, size of the industry, these are concepts which are also included in the recent revision of the regulation. So certainly inspectors will take these into account during the drafting. Next slide, please. We also received some feedback about the potential negative impact on setting too high level of expectation in some areas, especially veterinary medicinal products for clinical trials, or autogenous vaccines, or novel therapy products. And we also received various suggestions on specific topics for what should be in the annexes, which we're referring to as shopping lists, which we received in parallel to those comments. So I think in relation to the first point on the veterinary medicines, the autogenous vaccines and the novel therapies, for example, we received some feedback expressing preferences to have separate guidances for these particular types of products. We received good feedback expressing support for the integration of ICH concepts into any new guidance. We received quite a few comments and suggestions in relation to better definitions on the scope of the annexes in terms of product coverage and what types of products should be included. We received then some comments in relation to IMPs, and we also received some comments in relation to harmonization of wording between the different annexes and better cross-referencing with other parts of the GMP guide. And also we received some comments in relation to the dedicated facilities and the health-based exposure limits, which we've noted as well. Next slide, please. So where are we now? Currently, the drafting group is working on each annex. Just looking at the scope and the expectations for what we hope to achieve with these annexes. Looking at the different types of products, different types of dosage forms, looking at the structure coming from that, looking at the types of processes and the shopping list. And yeah, looking then at the structure, what would be the final goal in terms of a structure for Annex 4 and 5, and any other additional annexes that we may look at in terms of autogenous vaccines and novel therapies. And then the drafting group is currently working on a timetable. We have a very optimistic timetable in the concept paper. We're possibly looking at finalizing a draft of the annex for presentation to the IWG, maybe at the beginning of next year, and then going for a stakeholder consultation in March next year. I personally, it's an optimistic timetable, and we'll see if it changes. But that's our current plan, and I hope we can maintain that as much as possible. So next slide, please. So just to note, in addition to the work in the annexes, we also have, of course, the deliverable from the Regulation 2019-6 and Article 93, where the Commission shall, by means of implementing acts, adopt measures on good manufacturing practice for veterinary medicinal products and active substances used as starting materials. And you'll see in Article 153, the implementing act to be adopted at the latest by 29th of January 2025. And you heard from Eva from the Commission yesterday that this is a priority for the Commission this year. So we do expect to receive a request for scientific advice during this year. And of course, the IWG will be responsible for providing that advice as part of the agency, as a working group of the agency. So next slide, please. So in conclusion then, I hope you'll agree with me that there's a substantial modernization of EU GMP guidance underway. And international harmonization is assured through cooperation and collaboration with PICS. I think one of the key points we noticed from the comments in the consultation was that there was really a lot of good support for the level of stakeholder engagement, and that was certainly welcomed in the comments, and we intend to maintain a high level of stakeholder engagement during this process. We've had the first initial consultation on concept papers. Of course, we have, through the IWG, we have discussion and interaction with industry and professional associations through our interested parties meeting. And of course, we do fully intend to have a public consultation on the draft annexes when published, and we will invite comments again during that. And of course, when the finalized annexes are finally published, we'll certainly be looking at what level of stakeholder engagement and support we can provide during the implementation of those annexes. So I think, Chair and colleagues, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. That was a very interesting presentation. I'm sure that colleagues will be interested about the revision of the annexes, and maybe we have some time for questions I also noticed that you managed to do the presentation without even blinking at the flying slides that were moving up and down. So, colleagues, we have plenty of time for questions. I've noticed that there is a question on the chat from Patricia Olker. Can I suggest that maybe Patricia wants to raise the question verbally and maybe even put the video on, which is an option that seems that participants have not been very keen into. Thank you very much. We are sorting the technical issues.
Yes, thank you very much. I think you hear me. Yeah, my question was about maybe relating to some administrative practicalities around the template for GMP certificates and manufacturing and import authorization. These are, of course, living documents, and they are adapted, fine-tuned according to the discussions and agreements reached at the inspector's working party level. And of course, the template itself is published on the EMA website. But it appears to us, at least, or maybe we have missed something, so please, if you could let us know, that sometimes some changes are made and we have a feeling are not necessarily communicated to industry. So we have a hard time to find out what are the new requirements. And this might have an implications when we reach the stage of validation of a regulatory application, for example, because it might be raised as a blocking issue. So the question was about to know what are the communication ways that are used by the inspector's working party towards industry. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. So in relation to the question which refers to the template, I think for the GMP certificate, usually these procedures and templates are found in the compilation of union procedures, which is the quality manual for the inspectorates. And so generally we tend to update that without a consultation with industry, because this is for the inspectorates themselves to follow. However, we do from time to time, where we do perceive that there is a need to have a specific industry consultation, we do have limited stakeholder consultations on specific topics. And we're actually about to launch one today on an unrelated topic, but nevertheless an interesting one. So we do from time to time, where the IWG considers that there is a particular need to have a reach out to industry to get views, then we do carry out these types of targeted stakeholder consultations. So I think that's how we're currently doing it. And then, of course, we have our regular interaction with interested parties. But of course, all the national inspectorates are also in regular contact with industry stakeholders at a national level. So there's always a lot of dialogue coming along, and it's always possible to have points and issues raised either at a national level or directly through the agency for these things to be discussed at the IWG. Okay, I hope that addresses your question. Now, the next question is also around GMP certificates, which asks, with the new veterinary medicines regulation, will the GMP certificates cover both human and veterinary medicinal products, or on the contrary, are they going to be, until now, separating veterinary and human medicinal products? Well, I think in relation to issuing a GMP certificate, the GMP certificate will be issued in accordance with the legal basis for undertaking that inspection. So if the legal basis for the inspection was under the Human Medicines Directive or whether it was under the veterinary medicines regulation, that would be expressed on the GMP certificate. There may be situations where an inspection may cover both. So you may have certificates which have both legal bases on the certificate. But generally speaking, it's probably usually either human or veterinary, but it could include both. We have the flexibility for that. Okay, I hope that addresses that question. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Brendan. There is a question from Geoffrey Zeller. I don't know if you want to address it directly or if I should read it loud. It's a relatively straightforward question. I'll read it out then. Is there a working plan for the Gmdp IWG interested parties meeting published yet? Working plan, that's the question.
Okay, so there normally, well, let me start by saying that yes, usually we publish the work plan and the annual report of the inspectors working group. Now, for a number of years, while the agency was in BCP, the publication of annual reports and work plans was suspended. So we have now resumed, and we resumed with the annual report for last year, which is now published on our website. And we have agreed a work plan for the IWG for the next 2 years, I think, which will be adopted at the next meeting in June and will be published there afterwards. So you should see it over the summer on our website.
Thank you very much. That's great. Just to mention that we have also published from the veterinary side all the work plans of the working parties. So, any other questions about GMPs? We have still a few minutes left. Barbara?
Maybe it's important to bear in mind that Brendan has outlined the activities of the Inspectors Working Group and the stakeholder engagement that's likely to take place in this context. Please bear in mind that when the Commission mandate comes, the agency advice will follow the procedures that was followed for all of our other advices, and that actually equates to there will be no stakeholder engagement on the agency's advice at the agency, but we noted that the Commission did engage in targeted stakeholder consultations once the agency's advice was issued. But really, a plea from my side, use the opportunity you have now to engage and provide your input, because later it may not be available to the same degree. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Barbara. That's a really great point, and you know this is a great opportunity if you want to comment on in detail on GMP requirements and to have those reviewed and assessed by inspectors. This is the best time to get your input in when we publish the draft annexes. I think that's how I would recommend to get the best output from your input, as it were. Thank you.
All right, so I don't see any other question on the chat. We are half an hour ahead of the schedule, which is unusual, but also great considering that it's a Friday again. Then for the closing of the meeting, unfortunately, Ivo Klassen cannot be here and he has apologized for that. Barbara will do, has agreed, kindly agreed, Barbara Fresham, the chair of yesterday's session, obviously, has kindly agreed to do the close of the meeting. But before I pass the micro to Barbara, can I ask if there is any other general comment that you want to make? And I noticed that on the chat, there are a few exchange of questions from Jos and also Jana about pharmacovigilance, but I don't suggest now to retake those. So I think it might be a better idea to just have any new question that you might have. So please put your hand up if you have any final remark to make. Otherwise, Barbara will close the meeting. I don't see any hand up, so Barbara, all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we've come to the end of some very interesting 2.5 days. Just over 100 days ago, the Regulation 2019 entered into application. And I believe, therefore, it's a really good moment to take stock of how far we've come, what we still have to do, and how it has worked out until now. And of course, we heard from Eva, from the Commission, on what's going on in terms of developing follow-on legislation, including a few words on the advices that are still being developed at the agency. But when I listen to your feedback, I think you really appreciate that the Commission is, sorry, I'm messing up my notes. We at the agency, as well as the Commission, really appreciate your feedback that you've given us over these past 2.5 days on what the issues are for you and where we should focus our efforts in order to make sure that we really implement the regulation. And for the Commission, that includes, for instance, the value of the NTA, the notes to applicants, and we at the side of the regulators appreciate your support on that topic because we've also raised that a number of times. Ivo, in his agency's update on the IT system, said where we are, and we all know that this is really a work in progress. It was said probably first during Ivo's presentation, but it can't be said often enough. We are where we are only because of your dedication, input, and supportive attitude, especially when things entered into application and didn't quite work out. And so together we're really finding ways on how to take the issues forward, how to solve them, because the end result of our work should be that we realize the goals of the regulation for the industry as well as the regulators, including reduction in administrative burden. And I from our side can pledge that we will work towards that because in many ways we're in the same boat here. But you know, Ivo has also introduced how you can input in the future governance, and that will provide prioritization to us. But also he introduced ideas beyond the implementation of the regulation and specifically the veterinary big data strategy. So please, I know that you always start thinking ahead, but do provide feedback on that to us. I think that will be very valuable in helping us use the data that we now have at our fingertips in a most productive way going forward. David Murphy, in his last engagement with stakeholders as the chair of the CVMP, outlined the significant amount of guidance developed by the committee and gave a view of what's still coming. But that will then come under the chairmanship of Johann Schäferli, who was elected 2 days ago now. Kat Sterling provided really valuable feedback from the industry perspective, where things need to move on from where they are now, and flagging up issues like, for instance, the need for harmonization of national ID requirements is really valuable in structuring our work at the agency, but in this case at the Commission. If you have issues there and something can be done about it, that's really critical information to have. Today, we heard in detail about a number of regulatory topics, and I can't even begin to repeat them. But a lot of progress has been made there, and some issues are still in the process of being sorted out. So thanks to Emily for keeping all those many strings aligned and in progress. And again, I hope achieving the aim of the regulation of reducing administrative burden for industry and regulators alike. Jos and Sonia then gave presentations on the areas where Regulation 2019-6 most significantly changed processes, and that is pharmacovigilance. And a lot has been achieved since we last met in this forum, and we're not done yet. So stay tuned for further updates as we go forward. And you know, your numbers of questions really highlighted that this is a key area of interest. Some of the questions also related to the joint implementation group, so there is a specific stakeholder engagement forum to ensure that regulators and industry develop a joint understanding of the processes and procedures. Last, but definitely not least, we heard from Brendan on the ongoing work around GMP. And this, in many ways, links back to Eva's presentation. As we just mentioned it, I see it as a preparation and anticipation of the Commission's mandate. And please use the opportunity to provide your input. So from our side, your presentations and questions have really given us clear pointers on where you need our support. And it was very helpful for us in that way. And I trust the information we shared is as helpful for you. We will continue to address the issues that were noted over these past 2.5 days. And I trust we can count on you for your continued support during the next phase of the implementation. And in the end, as I said before, we hope we will achieve the aims of the regulation for industry and regulators alike. And with that, I would like to hand back to Jordi for a few last announcements. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the summary, Barbara. So few announcements. The first one is that considering that we are getting an average of nearly 600 people attending, or more than 600 people attending those info days, the agency is willing to have another info day probably in October. So we are still discussing about how to do that. Hopefully we will see some of you here. I don't know if the 600, that will be complicated, but I really wish that we can have a physical meeting to say hello to you personally. This is again the first CBMP meeting, physical CBMP meeting we had for a while, and it's been a pleasure, to be frank, to be able to see people directly again. Then just to let you know that in a few minutes you're gonna get by email a survey from my colleagues here about how was for you this info day. There is a second survey which I want to mention, is that Sylvia sent on behalf of Vivo a survey recently to those of you who have asked for a MAMS classification during the last years. So what we are trying to do there is trying to investigate how many of the products that were classified as MAMS reach the market, be it as a centrally authorized products. Well, we know about those, but we want to know also about the ones that were authorized via the centralized procedure, nationally authorized MAMS products. So please answer it. It's just a few minutes. It's not a very long one. We are aware about the workload that you also have on the industry, so we try to make it very short. And just to finalize, then I cannot close the meeting without saying thank you to my colleagues who've been organizing this hybrid meeting. And I don't underestimate the difficulty to have a hybrid meeting where we have people here, fire alarms going on, and you connected there, speakers connected also somewhere else. So thanks to Caterina Ferreira, Silvia Jeromi, and Alejandro Plat. That was great. And yeah, until the next one. We have a point here from my colleagues.
Just a quick reminder to the participants that all presentations and recordings will be made available in the event page in the upcoming weeks.
All right, so Katarina told you that on her grave, serious voice, so that means that it will happen. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend, all of you. Thank you.